It's a terrible idea. What time do we start?
Hot rod in the house, Mr. David Steele.
I know all about those big city women.
Show your face. You have every reason to be ashamed to be here.
Oh, believe me. It's now why no camera? Huh. Sorry guys, I'm super. There we go.
There it is.
It just had to warm up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like my cars.
Is this going to be all right, Evans?
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Audio and stuff.
Yeah. Just want to make sure it's loud enough. That's all. It sounds loud enough to me, so that's good.
Well, I'll be yelling most of the time. So
right. If we're doing our job.
Once we get going.
Yep.
And wow, you guys.
How are you?
Everything is good. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Yeah.
Doing great. Yeah, I'm having ideas.
Oh no. I remember what that was like.
Danger.
And can I just say, I cannot tell you how knocked out I am that you guys are doing this, that you guys are kind of, kicking up some dust in the floating men universe, in your little floating men universe for all the rest of the flotilla. What did you guys call them?
The flotilla.
Yeah. But no, really, I love it that you guys are communicating in public and talking about these great records and the shows and those years, and it's super fun. I mean, I'm a fan, so it's super fun.
I'm a fan too. Those young people were very talented, I thought.
And very young.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it was nice to kind of wake Holmes up from his hibernation, from his slumber, to listen and talk about the music a little bit. So it's been fun. So David Steele, for the listening audience who may have wondered what's been going on with you over these years, since your trek west, what updates would you want the world to know about your life and your West Coast dreams?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a pretty different picture now from the guy, 20 years ago who had the X Games half pipe in his backyard in Sylvan Park. And no, I moved to California in March of 2012. So we're 10 years here. I know. And, stopped playing music for a living in 2011. I guess that was the last time I played as a professional. Met my wife within weeks of moving here. It was pretty crazy.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But it took us a little time to close the deal. And now we have two little kids, our 3.5-year-old son, Bennett, and our 7-month-old daughter, Emmerling. And she's a violinist by trade and is most definitely the real musician.
Your wife, not your daughter, right?
My wife, yes. Sorry. Yeah.
Starting them young.
I'm not used to living with girls, so I still get everything confused there. But yeah, it's great. I kind of moved into my dream home, and I've got all this garage space for my car nonsense, and yeah, it's kind of crazy how it all kind of worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So happy.
very dreamlike. Every day I can't believe it. I get up in the morning and I walk out my back door and I cannot believe it. And that it hits me every single day.
Hmm.
I swear, I'm not kidding. Like
That's
no
awesome.
matter what's on my mind or how busy I am or how much of a hurry I'm in, I look out when I open the back door and I just can't believe it. And it's not just the backyard. It's the it's the whole package deal.
I think it's the fun fact about the three of us is that we had other passions that when music became not as, I don't know, fulfilling as it was, we walked into, well, Scott had to work a lot harder, I think, than you and I did, David, but we walked into dream jobs, you know, other than music, and we all, and you and I both work for, I think you guys are a 501c3, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are, yeah, the American Hot Rod Foundation. I can't believe I forgot to mention my job. Yeah, I have a job.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting, Holmes. I hadn't thought of that. I remember that, not to pick up the ball from you, but I remember that being a thing of interest in a very good way with me when I was first playing shows with you guys and we were taking car rides together. I loved, like, Bishop just had, like, man, I mean, he's talking about China and, you know, other parts of the world that I never even considered ever going to, let you know, or even knowing anything about. And he was just like an encyclopedia, you know, and all of you guys were like that with your different interests, and it just was it was like, man, these guys have big brains and they're really curious, and they're not just, you know, not that there's anything wrong with getting drunk and laid, but there was more to the day than that being a goal, you know, an ultimate goal. And you can edit that out if you want. But I mean that was I remember those car rides and just thinking, you know, these guys aren't your normal three-piece band, you know, of rock dudes. And so it was stimulating in that way. And I remember liking that early on.
It's great.
A lot.
Hey, Holmes, what's the you remember Dumpster Trash that we opened for in
Dumpster Juice.
Dumpster Juice? What did they say about us? They were asking like what we wanted to do after the show or something like that. And didn't they say something like, you guys probably just want to go home and read?
Yeah. And that was before we got high with them. Once we got stoned with them, they changed their opinion. They recognized the brainy punk aesthetic that we had.
Dumpster Juice.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dumpster Juice was a band out of the Twin Cities. We did a show with them in Minneapolis on the Tall Shadows tour. Not Minneapolis.
It was Madison.
Madison. Yeah, Madison. I think we both drove down, had done shows the night before in the cities. And their shtick was, and it was sort of speed metal. Their shtick was their lead singer would drink beer and then puke for the finale on stage.
That won't catch up with you, will it?
Quality.
No. Yeah.
I'd love to be his dentist.
All right.
Oh man.
So David, we thought we would we've been telling some stories about Making of Tall Shadows, as you know, and luckily between the two of us, and then with some help from Reed Nelson, we've been able to piece together most of kind of what went down in Indianapolis for those recordings. But we'd love to hear your, I don't know, your take on the story, like how you got asked to come in the first place and any first impressions, things like that. So what do you remember? Can you pull up any of those memories?
Well, I can, and it's been those were some of the highlights of the previous two podcasts for me when you guys were talking about Gary Schatzline and TRC and Alan Johnson and Larry and that whole gang. I mean, that was like, you know, my introduction to professional music industry stuff and people. And I mean, my God, being around Larry and Mellencamp's people, it was like, that's being thrown into the deep end, you know? But I mean, that's how it happened. I mean, I say it all the time. I mean, I would have never had a career playing music without Larry Crane. I don't know what I would have figured out, but he made it a whole lot easier. I mean, he just kept walking me through one door after another, going, use this guy, you know? And I was so young. I mean, my God, man, I was like 22 or 3 when I would have played on Tall Shadows. And I think I'd been in Larry's band for less than a year at that time. And I remember hearing from Alan Johnson. It wasn't Larry. It was Alan Johnson who called me and he said, we're recording this band up here. And Larry's, he either had done some guitar or was going to do some guitar, but wasn't going to be able to do as much as he thought or whatever. So he had nominated me to come up there. And I remember that so clearly because it was the first time Larry had ever done something like that since I'd been in his band. So that was a big deal. And it was a big deal for me as a, you know, because I lived in this tiny little town, Bedford, Indiana, you know, 80 miles south of Indianapolis. So Indianapolis was the big city and it was the home of Bob and Tom, you know, and Q95, and which was my morning radio, you know, and, you know, Larry was on, I mean, we would appear on that show in the morning and stuff, but I knew that those Q95 Bob and Tom live days were recorded at TRC. And I knew that Alan Johnson engineered them because that's how nutty I was about listening to like morning zoo radio, you know, our local morning zoo radio.
Love it.
So it was really cool. And, you know, to be asked to come up there and work. And I am so glad that Holmes dusted off this little corner of my memory bank, because I don't know that I would have remembered exactly that you had done this, but I got a cassette tape, I think from Alan Johnson, of some of the songs. And I don't think they were, you guys, I don't think had been in the studio yet. I think they were kind of broken down, very basic demos. And
yeah, probably
there was a phone number on the box, the cassette box, for Jeff Holmes. And I was supposed to call him. And when I called you, again, you reminded me of this, but this is no joke, because it all came back when you mentioned it. I was like, you know, asking something about what do you want? You know, what do you expect from me? And you said, swear to God, you said, do you know who David Lynch is? And I kind of did. And you said, have you ever seen that movie Blue Velvet? And whether I had seen it at that time or not, I'm sure I lied to you and said I had.
right.
And you said, it's like that.
Gee, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I was the guitarist by default. Don't ask the lyricist what it's about. But you
I
came
swear to
in.
God, that's not a joke. I remember that now clearly, that's what you said. Do you know who David Lynch is? You ever seen the movie Blue Velvet? it's like that.
Awesome.
That was your direction. So, I mean, I didn't know. I had no idea what I was going to do when I went. I just picked my gear and drove up there. And I kind of remember tracking. I remember you coming over to me and giving some direction. I think I that part's really foggy, to be honest. But I mean, it was nerve-wracking for sure. But I do remember, how quickly I was kind of like, because I was, I had been into songwriters for a long, long time. And I just remember loving your writing so much. I just thought it was so, everything was just like a major motion picture. Even one person in your song, their personality is so complex and big and has so many facets and surprises that I remember really liking that. And I don't know, it was fun. I remember it being fun, and that there was certainly, because I would remember this, there was never any kind of rub or like, oh man, how am I going to get through this? Or it was never a session like that at all. It was like friendly and creative. And there was a jazz horn player there, right?
Freeman.
Yeah.
Some of it.
Freeman. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember that being kind of a heavy duty moment in the studio, because he kind of wanted to meditate for a while before he did takes. And there was, he was adjusting the lighting for quite a while, I remember.
You've never been roomed with him on tour.
Towels over the bedside lamp and things like that.
Yeah, and it's been my luck with saxophonists, even with coughing. I say, I'm thinking smoky tenor, down deep. And they always go, okay, and pull out the soprano.
Ain't it always the way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's every sax player I've ever known.
But
I thought you
yeah.
Go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say, because I was thinking about this the other day, that I know we're talking about Tall Shadows, but another really nice memory is hearing from you guys again, because I thought it was kind of a one-off. I put some guitar tracks down on this record for these guys, and I remember really liking the record when it was all done. Alan sent me a few copies of it, and that's how my brothers became fans, because I immediately gave them a couple and said, you got to check this out, it's really great. And but I thought it was a session, and lo and behold, it was not that much longer. I had then moved to Nashville. That Invoking Michelangelo was kind of on the counter and being thought about, and you called me to do that, and that's when it really started feeling to me like, wow, I've got some kind of relationship with these guys, and how nice that was,
Well, you made an impression. I think one of my instructions to you also, maybe this may have been in the studio, was just whatever you do something better than what I could come up with. And you came in, I think, with maybe a old Fender Reverb Deluxe or something.
My Super Reverb, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The only amp I had at that time, I think.
Yeah. And I don't know if you had the Grass yet or not. I know you had a black Stratocaster.
For sure. That would have been the main guitar. I would have been playing my old Strat. Yeah.
Yeah, but I noticed right away you had flat welds on it, or on one of your guitars. And I said, thumpy thumpy, me like you the thumpy.
Yeah, I think I had a Silvertone then with flat wounds on it and a Bigsby and all that. That might be the Gretsch that you're thinking of, because it's a very Gretschy guitar.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
And we
yeah.
had you pull out the 12 string for Forgiven. I remember that.
Yeah.
I think when I listen to the mixes now, I wish we'd have mixed that a little bit higher, a little bit more jangly 12 string, but we were very cautious about getting too much electric instruments, taking over the space. But I long for more of that now when I listen to it.
I can't believe what I'm feeling. Your sin somehow set me on fire. No need to leave, 'cause I can be the one you long for.
It's a nice part. It's funny you bring that up because the last time I listened to the record, I was just positive that was Larry playing that 12-string part.
It was you.
I remember maybe you were trying to make a decision between this or that, and I think we all went, ooh, play the 12 string.
Yeah.
Well, and that also, it's kind of occurring to me now. I was chasing him so hard at that time. I was probably trying to impersonate him on the track. So maybe I did a good job. Because there's when the part turns around, there's a very Larry Crane, but it's like a ba do do da ba da do do da da unforgiven, right? That's so like something he would do because he is always playing little things that set up the lyric as it's about to hit. And so I think that was probably his influence on me at that time, which was, I was playing in his band, so it was crazy heavy.
Right.
Wow. I just, I think one of the first things that impressed me was, first of all, how easy you were to work with. But most of all, you were saying very eloquent things musically in a very primal, American rock way. You see what you understand what I'm saying here? There's a little bit of an offset that I really enjoyed, that dissonance between the primal voice saying the eloquent words, reciting the poetry that you'd put together. And that grew, of course, over time.
Well, that's very, very nice to hear. That's very nice.
Hence the callback.
I guess so. Yeah. That's nice. Bishop said something to me really early on that was really nice too. I remember being very taken by, he said something really over the top, like, I think you might be the only guy who could ever play with us or something. But I mean, that was really early. It was probably on the first time I ever played live with you or something like that. Because I don't know that I played live with Bishop more than just a handful of times. I don't think.
Yeah, just a few. I think you started gigging with us in 97 or 98, just off and on when you were close and we were close and you weren't touring.
Mm-hmm.
I think you were doing Steve at that time. I don't remember.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick on that, just a little sidetrack. Might be fun for folks to hear, what you were doing at that time. I know you were playing with Steve, and you had other things going on. What was keeping you busy in between times when we could get you to come play with us?
Well, I mean, it just Larry Crane. Because he hired me into his band, but he was working in Nashville a bunch, and he would take me with him. This is in like 92 and 3. And that's how I met John Prine, because he and Larry were buddies. And then in late 94, early 95, John was putting a new band together and asked Larry to be in the band. Excuse me. And and he made some kind of crazy deal with Albinetta and Prine. He said, look, I'll do it, but you're going to bring my buddy with me because we're a good team. He does what I don't do and vice versa, which is kind of true. And John went for it. So I was in John's band for like a year and a half, not nearly as long as I would have liked to have been, but I was so naive that I thought, oh, I'll get more gigs like that. But I mean, I kind of did, because I went right to Steve Earle
right
in late '95 and was with him until the spring of 2000 with some breaks. He did like some bluegrass records, and I actually left his band for a little bit, which when I saw him a year and a half ago, he was one of the first things he said to me. He goes, "The only son of a bitch that ever quit my band that I hired back."
I could hear that coming out of his mouth.
Which is a nice compliment.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I was doing. I was playing with,
great people,
singer-songwriter folks, and basically my heroes. I mean, it's insane. I mean, Jason Wilbur and I've joked about it. Jason Wilbur being one of my best friends and guy that I came up with in the Bloomington area playing in all kinds of different bands. And he replaced me in Prine's band and ultimately played with John for 20 some odd years. Brilliant guitar player and just a great guy. But it's kind of a running gag that, sorry about the phone call. We used to talk about, where are we going to go? We can't stay in Bloomington for our whole lives. And we would talk about LA, New York, Austin, Nashville. What are we going to do? And we would kind of beat around Nashville and say, but Nashville, country music. And then we would always say, or apparently I would always say, because this is the joke that he lays this one on me. He's like, you used to say, yeah, but John Prine and Steve Earle live there. So Nashville's got to be great.
Yeah.
And I moved to Nashville and I go to work for John Prine and Steve Earle. So
that's awesome. You just have to speak it and it comes true.
It's very strange. It's that that's that funny Oprah secret, I guess. That's
right.
Not much of a secret to me, but I appreciate it. But let me add something here, because this has been on my mind as maybe we're all kind of getting nostalgic in these times in our lives and the ages we are. Looking back on this stuff, you're asking me like, what were you doing? And it's more remarkable to me all the time that, I got to work for my heroes in my 20s. But man, like, there were two things that I did in Nashville, really the whole time I was there, that I'm most proud of and I have the most kind of emotional attachment to. And it's you guys, and it's my friends Dave and Gil,
right,
when we were doing our Esquires, trio thing. Because after I kind of got into the rhythm of playing with you guys live, and then further recordings, making records, being part of that process, I started to feel like I was part of a creative process and kind of in the band. I wasn't, but kind of felt that way. Certainly did emotionally to me. I was pretty invested in the idea of it, and it's funny. Like, I think that's one of the reasons when I saw you guys kind of popping up and talking about all of this again, I was like, wow, that's so great that I'm going to get to hear about this and hear these guys talk again. And because Steve, well, certainly with Prine, without question. I mean, every single night he would play his acoustic set in the middle of the show, and I would just stand in the wings and just shrink and shrink and shrink with every passing lyric, thinking, why am I going to go back out there? it's only going to make it worse. There's nothing I mean, because that man with his guitar and his song,
magic.
it could be the greatest band in the world, and it could even be the most appropriate band for him in the world. It's still not going to be as good as him when it's that pure thing.
Right.
So when you have that kind of built into the situation, as I always felt with Steve and especially John, you're just trying to stay out of their way, you know, and not screw it up. As you mentioned this in a previous podcast, Holmes. Apparently I say that a lot. I'm trying not to screw it up. But it was so true with those guys, because they just didn't need anybody. They just wanted a band, you know.
Right.
And not that you guys needed additional anything, but there was something about you guys adding color to the trio that always, it felt more band-like to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure I can even articulate it. It's just, that's the way it felt.
Well,
And,
I think it's around the point, it didn't take long for me to start incorporating, you and I have chatted about this, incorporating you into the writing process, and to my own approach to the guitar, leave space for David. If David doesn't play, it's supposed to be empty space, was sort of my focus. And then when we all got on stage at the same time in 2001 at 12th and Porter, that was the first time. And that Sunday night, that final night, along about the time we all had rockturnal emissions on idle hours, I think we all knew we're writing for a 6-piece, and we're gonna all sit down together and arrange it. I said, I can't see doing that without Steele's interplay from the start. And a lot of songs, you had a big influence on the direction that they went. You said, let's do this here. We got a good thing going. Let's linger over it here. And everybody was contributing that way. And you and Katros were like yin and yang, just playing off each other. And there's a great sense of humor in your playing. I think you pull some tongue-in-cheek shit on me sometimes. You think I might not notice, but in the deep listenings of the past year or so, I'm like, I see what he did there. And I can say that about all the players. And I like that. I like the fact that it was never exactly the same any two nights in a row. And you guys weren't afraid to step up, take the spotlight, and, you know, show your stuff. And I would gladly get it out of the way. I can remember times with you on stage with us when we'd give you the long solo, you know, we'd do an extended jam with you. And I would take off my guitar, walk out into the audience, sit down on the front row, and listen to you unfurl this gorgeous soliloquy, you know. And
we should do it more often.
You need that? You want me to text you? I can sext you if you want me to.
That's wonderful stuff, man. That's really, really nice.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that on I don't think any of us knew that, Scott, on Tall Shadows, because we had such a tight reins on it.
We did. And I mentioned it in the previous podcast, Dave, that we were so afraid of overproducing what we had been doing, and part of that was thinking that any instrumentation needed to be mixed low for one thing, but also just color around the edges, and that worked for that record, but didn't give us a chance at that time anyway to really hear, all the things that you were going to be able to add in the future, which you did.
Well, to me, it all seemed to happen in such a nice, comfortable, organic, gradual way. It was almost kind of, it was kind of like by the time it was a 6-piece band, I almost had to kind of stop and realize the journey the whole thing had taken.
Right.
So did we.
But yeah, because like with every record and with every creation, it seemed to kind of get, it was kind of doing this, and it's really says so much about, I think, especially just you two guys. It says so much about you two guys, the writing, the vocal combination, that it was just, that part was always bulletproof. It was just this anchor and this kind of, touching off point or whatever, for the rest of us. And I think one of the great examples of that I would bring up to kind of like support my point here, because I really do believe this. It's an incredible thing that, because I actually remember worrying about this, like I had a say in anything. But when Bishop split and went to the next chapter of his life, I was like, the whole band, it's just going to be completely different now. Like this whole thing, they had this sonic picture, and you can't take one of those guys away from that. Not when it's a trio. And Bishop had that snap to his pocket that was so beautiful. It was so energetic, and there's like this enthusiasm to his snare hits that was just like, I'm going to push this thing along always with this kind of like, there's something youthful about it. Even when the lyric was kind of dark and heavy, he was still like, no, but there's a pulse. There's always going to be this pulse. And man, that's a magic thing. I mean, to find a guy with that musical personality, it was exactly what I thought you guys needed to complete that trio. And so when I knew Steve Eby, I was familiar with him. I'd played with him. A great drummer, but it's like until you put that in the mix, you have no idea what's going to happen, And I was very naive in my thinking. I thought I think he might overpower it, and God, Steve, forgive me if and when you hear this, because who the hell am I to question him? I mean, he had been around the block way before I had started down the street, and he's got giant ears, and he's a super musical guy. And I remember the first time we were in a room with him, and I was like, wow, he adjusted, and it all makes sense. It's just as good. It's just a little bit different. It just doesn't have Bishop's fingerprint isn't there. It's a different one now, but it's still working equally as well. And I think there was something about when he came in, that to me opened up like, wow, you can now have two guitars and all this stuff, because I don't know, there's something about the original trio thing that it seemed dangerous to tamper with that. But when you brought in somebody who had Steve's background, he'd played so much. I mean, I remember playing blues with Eby, and I was like, did you grow up in the Delta? And he's like, actually, yeah, kind of. Like he could play, he could do anything, and it would sound and feel and real authentic and appropriate always. And I mean, that was, to me, was like the jackpot, like once he was in place, it could really go anywhere at that point.
That's part of the realization I was having as a songwriter as we were going through each album, and I was writing for each album, is that when we got to Eby, there was something there, a light bulb went off in my head, and I said, this band can do anything. And I said, and if it's too complicated, I don't have to play, which is a good thing. And that the writing just went. Whoop.
I agree. I remember thinking that in the moment too, that like, wow, Jeff is really man. Marathon man.
Yeah, but and there were so many limitations inherent in the 3-piece, the original acoustic 3-piece. Certain things that we couldn't get away with on stage, if we tried to do a loud guitar solo, the bottom would fall out, not the bottom, but the tonal structure would fall out that I was given with the chords, and things like that were somewhat limiting. So I'm sort of glad the tools, the resources, and especially the smarts started, and you were the first, sticking to us. I mean, I knew Scott was a badass bass player. I couldn't ride over his head, and the duet vocals can happen over any bed. Now let's play. Let's get our mischief on. And that's what it felt like. And that's
I think that's again, it goes back for me to, that's one of the great joys of having traveled along with it, to have been there at TRC for Tall Shadows, when it was this pretty specific picture that you guys were painting, and it wasn't delicate, but you had to be real careful with it, because it just, I mean, my God, the idea of having 2 guitars on Tall Shadows I mean, it's so absurd, to have something to introduce something that grand to that record, and the way you 3 guys played together. So to have gone from that to then being in the studio with you guys, and we're like doing Allman Brothers stuff, I mean, so to have experienced everything in between and all of it, I think that's kind of gets me back to like thinking about why it kind of had such an impact on me, because it's rare that you get to ride along with an evolution like that.
I wish many, many, many more people knew about all this. But
maybe this is the start of introducing more and more people to it. I don't know.
It might be. I think.
I mean, I'm curious what Scott like. What do you remember, Scott, about? I mean, were you sold like when Larry came in, when I came in, to start doing stuff with Tall Shadows? I mean, do you remember your feelings about it? Were you a little freaked out and hesitant, whatever?
I pretty clearly remember mixed emotions about hearing that Larry Crane was going to come play on the record, and mixed in the way that I think at that time, I think probably Jeff Bishop and I were maybe a little snobby about pop music, and at the time, of course, Mellencamp was everywhere, right? In pop radio, and knowing that Larry Crane was a guitarist, I think maybe I'll just own it myself. I think I've maybe felt like, oh, that's not us, right? That glitz and glam. But I think the other part for me was like, cool, Larry Crane's going to play on a record, right? That's going to be great. And I think we mentioned in a previous podcast recording that it was, I don't know if we were actually in the decision-making matrix about having Larry come. It was almost like that was kind of handed to us as something that was going to happen. Is that what you recall, Jeff?
It was offered to us and we accepted, because I really, I did. I mean, I did some power chord pads, but I just was not going to invent on guitar anything like a fresh set of ears. And I had some trepidation about Larry too, because of the mainstream thing. I thought he would whitewash it, and he didn't. He kept it earthy, but then Steele comes in and it gets real earthy.
Yeah, yeah. That was the real win for me. Was yeah, we got enough of Larry Crane for brushstrokes, and it was nice to have him on the record. But then being introduced to you and having you do what you did on the record, but probably more important than that was just coming into our lives and being able to hang around for a while. And back to what Bishop said earlier, or what you said that Bishop said to you about, I don't think anybody else could come in and play guitar with this band. That's exactly what I thought at the time too. I think we probably wouldn't have let anybody in, and weren't really looking for anybody to come in. But then we met David Steele.
Wow. Well, that's great. I had it so fun and funny to hear you remember your feelings about Larry, because it's funny. I have a version of that for you guys from my perspective that I remember, because I remember the music that I was kind of quickly checking out, leading up to going into TRC to work on Tall Shadows with you guys. But to cover the Larry thing though quickly, I could totally see how like you guys would be like, what does Pink Houses have to do with the Floating Men and these songs that are going to be this record, Tall Shadows? I could totally see that. I mean, that kind of like, cornfield, rural Southern Indiana, landscape that just seemed to like pour out of his guitar every time he played. He sounded like where he was from. And I mean that in the nicest way.
Yeah.
Those records really have as specific a feel to that part of the country for me as E Street Band records feel like gritty blue collar Jersey. So I could totally understand having that kind of anxiety about like, this guy's going to come in and going to be happy skippy, there was no such thing as the label Americana wasn't around, but that kind of almost pop Americana guitar thing. But I remember hearing the demos, whatever they were, and man, I've kept ask my wife, I keep everything. I've got boxes of so much stuff, and I guarantee you I still have this cassette somewhere with what was initially sent to me. And I remember listening to REM, U2, The Smiths, and this, believe it or not, a band that I had when I lived in New York, in upstate New York, when I was in grade school, called the F.E.U, which stood for the First Eden Underground. And we were crazy about like kind of early U2 and that kind of gritty UK, blue collar, punky, whatever you want to call it, like punky folk, or something. The songs were really smart, but there was a darkness to it and a kind of punky edge. And that's kind of what we did. And that's what I was doing in like 6th and 7th grade with a trio.
Awesome. That's great.
So you were in the hot seat like me.
Well, I was just
the guitarist.
I was not a singer, or anything like that. And the whole thing was driven. The First Eden Underground version of You was this kid, Scot Carpenter, who was the bass player, singer, songwriter, and he brought all of his stuff and we just, tried to, create around his songs. And there, believe it or not, that stuff actually has some things in common with the Floating Men and with your writing, Jeff. So it's it's funny. I had a little bit of an introduction to it in my very first band, but since then I had gone out into the world of like, you know, quote unquote roadhouse, you know, guitar band gigging, you know, and so I'm playing Allman Brothers and Stevie Ray Vaughan and all that kind of stuff, and then I end up playing with Larry Crane, and so it was like when I heard these songs and they're saying, yeah, you're going to go up and work with these guys, like I got to go back to, I need to go listen to the F.E.U, you know, and listen to what I was doing when I was playing in a trio and kind of playing music like that. So it's funny, I was going in thinking I'm going to be way too kind of American, you know, folky electric guitar for these guys. These guys they need somebody with black fingernail polish.
No.
Jeff probably had some of that in his bag in the studio. Just needed to ask.
Yeah, I think you never know when you got to get your goth on.
I would have borrowed some.
Hey, David, we need to hear some of that music from your first band. So if you got any MP3s, you could shoot our way.
I will dig that out. I think you guys would like it. It's I remember Dave Rawlings, and it was in Nashville not too long after we all moved there. We all kind of moved there at the same time in '93. And I got that cassette out of my junior high band, and he kind of looked at me and he goes, "It is so Rawlings." He goes, "You know, you should have never stopped doing that." That he goes, "That was your one chance."
You blew it.
And he's not
That's
kidding,
awesome.
you know. But anyway, there you go. So I love hearing that. I love hearing Scot's memories about, you know, what you thought of Larry might or might not do.
I mean, for me, it was, you know, and Jeff and I have had long conversations about this, you know, traveling in the van many years, but, you know, it's like this tension between like really wanting to keep the integrity, you know, of what we were trying to do, yet also, you know, wanting to be paid for it, right? So if that meant, you know, we get a hit or we get, you know, a record deal or something, you know, and those things, I think a lot of musicians struggle with that tension between the commercialization of what they're trying to do and kind of maintaining their integrity of the music. And I think we were pretty hypersensitive to that at the time, I think.
But over the years, you could probably observe from your vantage point, David, this gradual uptick in our old saying, "What's it going to do? Ruin our career?" You know, kind of like, you know, it's a terrible idea. What time do we start?
Yeah.
You know, so and that's when we started, you know, if it comes, it comes. If it don't, we made our record. Right. We play our gigs.
Nothing is more freeing than that, you know. You know, you guys had good reason to be kind of like, you know, thinking over like, how do we make all this work? How do we stay true to ourselves? Because this thing is starting to bubble over here, and the machine might want us.
Well, the machine asked, and it's probably didn't work out because Holmes was difficult. But
I've been that guy.
There's a couple of things about it that are important to remember about that phase. One of them is that I think I personally, and probably Scott as well, and Scott even more well-educated than I am as a musician, much better educated, and me being an educated writer, there was something about my dreams that didn't involve Madison Square Garden, that didn't involve, you know, a football stadium. They involved a recital hall. They involved a panel discussion at a literature conference. That's where I was trying to go. So that inherently is at odds with what the ambitious rock star would want. And those remain my primary goals.
I would imagine that those were the
Oh.
people you admired were people playing large theaters to very dedicated audiences, I would think.
Yes. Yes, and head off the beaten path taste. And the other thing about it was I think we played more not to lose than we played to win, because the music industry was so predatory, especially in Nashville. And I think the standard deal was 88.12 after recoup with a record label. And a publishing company wasn't going to buy a quarter of this or half of it. They wanted it all. And they wanted you to write on a schedule. So there's so many reasons why it was very scary, and we more or less protected ourselves.
Yeah.
More than anything.
Yeah. There were opportunities for sure. And thankfully, and I don't know, I'm not even really sure if we got any great legal advice. We just looked closely at what was being offered, and it was distasteful, right? To think that we were going to hand over so much of what we were and not have any ability to get it back if things didn't work out.
And that was a common practice.
We had friends
who, lots of friends out of Nashville that got signed in the late 80s and early 90s, never to be heard from again. And that was a common practice to snatch them up, put them in a no-win situation, and just get them out of the competition pool.
Well, and then forever own their creations.
In case anything stuck, we own your ass for life.
Just in case. We've got this catalog over here. Yeah. I remember I remember, I won't say any names, but a good friend of mine who did go on to have a great career and is continuing on with a great career to this day. When this person had their first serious real deal sit down meeting on Music Row with I don't know if it was a label or a management company, but I know that there were attorneys present for both sides. And they had this meeting, and this is when we were all kind of fresh to town. It was all new to us. And so we went over to this person's apartment to be there to get the report, the post-game report. How did the meeting go? Did you sign a deal?
Right.
And I can remember just the body language of my friend walking into this apartment and sitting down and kind of exhaling and just saying, I can't believe it. They said, I sat there and listened to all these people talk, saying things that every one of them knew was not true, and wanting me to go along with it. And I thought, wait a minute, both sides? They're like, oh yeah, my side, it's just a game. They all know each other. They all golf together. And this was just a theater piece,
Yeah, and there's only 12 of them, that really pull the strings.
Yeah.
But everyone collectively all saying things that this person knew wasn't true. And she knew that they knew it was not, none of it was true. There was just such a feeling of it's just a big vacuum.
And that's what we were afraid to fall into. And as much as it hurt to do it the way we did it, I'm so glad now.
Yeah.
Scott and I are just like going, we got all this stuff. Where do we start? You know, it's just a question for you. Can we name the movie star you stood up for a date like a dumbass?
Yeah, Winona Ryder. Yeah, my oldest brother Rick has the best line about that. When I told him the story, he says, so wait a minute, you were set up on a date with her, but you didn't go out with her. And I said, yeah. And he goes, so you didn't go out with Winona Ryder? And I said, no. And he goes, me either. Which really, he really got his point across. And it really is a kind of a non-story, but it's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a true one. And yeah.
Good stuff. Well, the last thing is maybe I can just ask if we can listen to something together.
Ooh.
May I take? I would too. May I take a bio break?
Sure. Take about it. You want me to wait for you to get back, though, right?
You can go ahead and start it. I've heard it.
But I was hoping to get live reactions from the three of us, but like
30
Mystery Science Theater type of thing, right?
All right, 30 seconds. I'll be right back. Save it.
Very good.
So this is a song from Tall Shadows, David Steele, that was performed live, and well, you might recall this moment.
It's a real pleasure to introduce a special
You hear this
guest of the
okay?
Floating Men that is with us tonight.
Oh my God, I know what this is.
We all know this man's work from seeing his performances in such films as
Oh my
Annie
God.
Hall, The Deer Hunter, Pulp Fiction, just to name a few. A graduate of the Actors Studio, he is best known for playing menacing
Oh my
or
God.
psychologically damaged characters.
Oh my God.
It's 2 pages.
Can you
Tonight
pause
we're
it?
doing a
Can you
rare
pause it?
dramatic reading of one of his favorite.
I swear to God, I remember all of this so clearly, and that was my favorite comedic moment of the whole bit. Was when Holmes pulls his head from the mic in disbelief and holds the papers up. They're 2 pages. It was that was the high water mark for that bit. That was so funny. Anyway, I can't believe that you are playing. This is very, very
Floating Men songs.
But pause it
Without
one more
further
time.
ado, please make welcome.
Oh my God. Wow.
You picked the most dumbed down fucking postmodern bodice ripper I ever wrote.
Oh,
I read it. It's like 2 words. So wild. And you made it into magic.
well, let me tell you, man, there was a reason for behind that. Yeah, I love the idea of him saying wild, so wild, wild, so wild. I knew that you would be able to play with that impersonation. So it had honestly had nothing to do with the song other than that.
Academy Award-winning actor Christopher Walken.
I cannot believe this. Oh my God. Oh my God. There's no way the impersonation is good. There's no way.
You might be surprised.
Hello,
Oh my God.
you people. You look wonderful tonight. I can't believe it.
Oh no.
I'll tell you.
Oh God.
I was a little under the weather earlier today, but dysentery, diarrhea, nothing could deter me from making this Floating Men show. I'm a huge
God.
fan. So I would like to read for you one of my favorite Floating Men songs. Jeff Holmes, he wrote this.
Oh my God.
The song is entitled "It's So Wild." It's from the record Tall Shadows. You may remember.
Oh my God.
So if you'll bear with me.
Oh no. Oh my God.
Mesmerized, I can make out your face through the veil and the candlelight. Paralyzed, I can make out your lips through the smoke, and I'm hypnotized by
Okay.
your eyes.
It's getting
Oh.
funny.
Oh, I am wild for you. Your eyes.
Oh.
I'm wild for you. So wild.
There you go.
So wild. Thrill me.
You
Just
can play that so many
one
ways,
breath
you know.
on my breast.
Oh my God.
You can take me alive, steal me. Just one touch of your claws at my throat, and I'm hypnotized by your eyes. Oh, I'm wild for you. So wild, I tremble. I writhe at the touch of your fingers. On fire for you. So wild for you.
Well, the audience are just great. They're just great.
Tease me.
Into it.
Keep your kisses inches from my reach and breathe on me. Seize me. Whisper your secrets. Whisper your forbidden dreams and your eyes. I'm wild for you.
Okay, I like that. I like that little bit.
I tremble and I writhe at the touch of your fingers. They're on fire for you. So wild. So wild. So wild. I'm wild for you. Thank you.
I'm really insane. I'm completely crazy.
That's why you fit in so well.
Wow. Man, you guys
I've got
are really good sports.
I've got a
Oh, wow, Scott.
I think that was the biggest audience reaction we got all night. So, hey, whatever it takes, man.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Next time you can white blue.
Oh, wow.
Jeff sent me some tracks for a potential live recording, and they weren't named, right? There was just like track 1, and you can saw track 9. I was just kind of clicking through, listening, and that popped up, and I listened to it, and I was in tears listening to it in my headphones by myself. So funny.
Oh,
On the track, I think it's the one that was track 10.
That was 9. Yeah.
That was 9.
Yeah.
wow.
It may be the next track, or the one before it, where it was like one of the piano Dixieland type things from The Haunting, and it just sort of decayed into Jody just doing things. The song was over. We were doing all tuned in. Drinking water. Jody was still playing, and Steve was still banging along, and Steele grabs a mic and goes, "When you're a jet, you're a jet all the way. From your first cigarette to your last dying day."
Wow.
That's on that same batch of songs.
I got a million of them.
I got chunks of guys like you in my stool.
The Sinatra group. Yeah.
Well, listen, David, this is I could do this all night. So much fun, and
Me too.
hopefully we'll get to come back to talk about other records along the way that and break
would
down
love
some of the
that.
songs a little bit, and hope to bump into you face to face in the same town at some point in the
Yeah.
not so distant future.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yep.
Yeah, any time, man. This is super, super fun. And yeah, the more we talk, the more I want to talk. It's just great. Just the greatest memories of
Yes.
playing
here.
music with you guys, making music with you guys. It's just
Hmm.
all good.
See, Scott, I told you 30 years ago, if we get them young,
Right.
they're so
Train 'em up.
impressionable. That's right.
Oh, man.
All right, gents.
Guys, great to see you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Take care, Dave.
Love you guys.
Kiss that family.